Hello.
So as you can see, Miss Tina's not with us today. Our schedules did not align, but she did give her blessing for us to continue on without her this week. So this week I have our friend Leah with us. And she is a friend who is very active in Medina County in the political world. She has worked on many campaigns, I would say countywide, some statewide issues, candidates, all the things. And I thought she was the perfect person to talk to us today about a topic that has been coming up recently, which is voter intimidation. And so I thought we could just like talk about our experiences. Obviously, you're going to have way more stories than I do, but I think it's important. And yeah, so we're here talking today about voter intimidation. Leah, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, we are in a weird time.
Definitely.
And I want to say that maybe around 2020, I started witnessing some things. I moved out here to Medina County from Lakewood, and I started seeing around election time things like signs being vandalized at people's homes. I started hearing stories about like signs and flags being stolen from people's homes. And then more recently, like even just meeting you and meeting candidates and things like that, I hear stories about like candidate signs being stolen and things. So, like, I don't know, do you want to just share about the things that you're seeing currently and in the past and all the things?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely gotten a little crazy since 2020. I think things have started to heat up already with this being a presidential election season. For the primary, I was working on a levy campaign and I was thinking we were probably pretty good. We were in the clear with it being a levy and it being the primaries, and the attitudes have already started to kind of heat up a little bit with some yard sign stealing and people taping their own papers onto yard signs at polling locations on election day, which is illegal, and all kinds of stuff. So yard signs being stolen. We even had car magnets being stolen. So
Gosh,
yes.
okay, let's talk about like the legalities. So, like, it is illegal to like touch someone's property, right? Like to
Yeah.
vandalize, to take the theft, right? Like those are all illegal things. And in my just kind of brief research, I'm learning that like yes, you could be fined for those. I think it's petty theft if it's under $1,000, and you could be fined up to $1,000 and face up to 180 days in jail. Now, I'm not sure that those things are like happening, but what can people do? Like, what if I'm a homeowner and my things get stolen, vandalized, whatever? I may not have a good lawyer to, go and take someone to court over these things, but like, what can I do?
Mhm. Well, I think the first thing is to reach out to the police department because it is technically a misdemeanor to touch somebody else's political sign. You're not allowed to vandalize, take, or mess with them. Something I recently learned, which has been really useful knowledge to have, is that so as long as it has the paid for by on your sign, which it has to legally, then if you have that, it is technically a property of the campaign. So yes, so really, your yard sign is on loan from the campaign technically. So it's still the campaign's property. So while you also contact the police, you should also contact the campaign because there might be something that they're able to do with it also being their sign. But it's also the responsibility of the campaign to put out the information that the signs are on loan, or it might fall on the responsibility of the person who owns the sign. So there's a little bit of dual responsibility there.
Okay. Okay. And like, I guess what has your reaction been from law enforcement when things are reported? And well, I mean, first of all, I think that you've shared with me that people are maybe afraid to report sometimes. And so maybe things are underreported first.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I feel like I hear a lot from people about stuff that's happening and, they don't know the right measures or they're not sure if it's illegal or what they should do. And
Or
because of
they're
that,
afraid. Like
everything. Yeah,
I've
yeah,
talked to people who are literally afraid of retaliation. And
yeah.
so they're like, I'm just not going to say anything.
Yeah, and I can't fault anybody for feeling that way in the slightest because your safety is always going to be what's most important. But, when you're having those kinds of issues, what I've done a lot of times is, I've contacted the police. If you're feeling unsafe, at least luckily here in Medina City where I live, we've been very, very lucky with our police department and them taking everything very seriously. And I've asked them before when I've had issues like, hey, can you drive around my house a couple extra times at night just to make me feel a little bit better? And I've
Yeah.
noticed that they have, which is nice because they really are taking it seriously. And when we called about the levee, signs and the stuff that we were dealing with the vandalization there, they were also taking it seriously and talking about how it needed to be kind of put to an end now before we get into the November election, which I'm very
Yes, and this
grateful
is
for.
why I wanted to talk about it because this stuff has been going on for years and I'm like we've now set the standard. I don't think it's appropriate. Well, I know it's not appropriate and like I just want it to end. I'm not into this like this tit for tat kind of thing and it's like I don't know what it's called in the political world but just like a fair like clean kind of election, right? Like where we're just not going that below the belt. I don't know, just it, I've got this neighbor friend, she, puts out her sign and it gets stolen and it's just like she has no way to, she doesn't have a ring doorbell and I understand that not everyone can afford that and that's totally a privilege to have and so not everyone can like secure their home with a camera. Um Not everyone is going to have the funds to like buy another sign. Like, so for candidate signs sometimes, or for issue signs, they ask for a donation and then it is your sign, right? Like, and so not everyone can afford to be putting out $5, $5, $5 every time they have a sign stolen. And so, my neighbor in particular then decides to put her sign in her front window, like inside her home. And yeah, I mean, it's like I've seen people go through really like great measures to protect their signs, like taping things to the metal posts that go in the ground. I've heard like Vaseline. I think someone in our city in Wadsworth used like an alarm system and like wrapped their, sign with an alarm system. I mean, I worked recently this past November with signs in the city. I, got calls weekly about signs being stolen, vandalized, things like that, and asking if they can be replaced. And so, I'm running around and replacing all these signs. It's just like, I don't know. I'm at a loss of like, why are we touching people's things?
You wouldn't think yard signs don't vote, they're not,
Yeah.
they're
Well,
not
and that's
something
the other
that.
thing. It's like a part of me is like, you can take the sign. I'm still gonna vote a certain way.
It almost makes me feel stronger in my beliefs, in a
Sure.
way.
Right, right. Yeah, and like I think we should be clear that I think that a lot of this comes from the extreme sides, right? Like we do see it on both sides, and it's just an extreme. What other forms of like voter intimidation have you seen aside from just like signs and things
I
like that?
mean, a lot of what I've gotten is kind of from being involved and people knowing that I'm involved is more instead of like a group attack, a more like personal attack. But that's because people understand like how people see me being involved in multiple things time after time again. So,
Okay.
I think it makes it a little different than the average person.
Okay.
I'm kind of out there and putting my face out there a lot. But
Okay.
in doing that, I have before like gotten an email with a death threat or, had people kind of like, kind of try to threaten me or, my family in a way, just try to intimidate and scare me. And it's one
That
of
is
those
so
things,
that none of that
yeah,
is okay.
it's never okay. And I mean, I feel very lucky that I feel safe and, I feel like I live very close to the police department. I have a ring door camera,
Sure.
try to take all the measures that I can. And I really started that when I was working to get the Confederate flag out of the Medina County Fair, is when that really started to heat up.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that was because I was doing it personally. So my name was attached to all of it, which made it
Okay.
a little different than like working on a campaign or something.
Yeah.
But I did obviously go to the police with that, and they did take it seriously and make a report.
Good.
And luckily, they really made me feel a lot better about it, which I think in turn made me feel safe, during that. But
Yeah.
also, like, because we knew the person, since it came from, their email, it was really easy to know who it was and to be able to kind of monitor the situation. And it made me feel a lot safer too, because we were doing events on the square in Medina here that was like a rally about it, and that kind of
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
And that I was a little nervous about, because when you're publicizing that everywhere, anyone could show up. And
Right.
the nice thing about the police department is, like, they knew the people, and they were like, if you even see them, I don't care if they're not doing anything wrong, you call us and we're coming up, which
Oh,
is
that's so nice. So
yes,
nice.
yes,
Yeah.
it definitely makes me feel so much safer.
Yeah. So, okay, like, do you think that part of our responsibility then is to just kind of open that conversation with our law enforcement, and like is there a way to be proactive? Like, should we start having those conversations now about like, hey, maybe this is something that we should look out for. It's something that we've seen around, even if it's not being reported to you, we're hearing it around from our neighbors, from the people literally next to us, from, people that are campaigning, from the candidates themselves, that this stuff happens. And I don't know, like, is that the best way, like, to try and garner some support?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that would be a very useful tactic, especially going into this November where we're seeing a replay of 2020 kind of.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So,
Like deja vu.
right. But I think that that will be a big help with us going into, this election cycle. I think also, at least speaking to the Medina police here, when we were dealing with the levy stuff, they're very much like, we need to nip this in the butt before it becomes a problem. Like, we
Good.
don't want it
Yeah.
to be a problem in November. We're already aware that it was in 2020. There's a good chance it will be again, and we cannot have this. So I think
Right.
that they are somewhat aware, but to make them aware of, we're already seeing it, we're already, experiencing some of it. We definitely want to make sure that they understand, how severe some of these situations can be, and they take it seriously, which luckily they have been, but we want them to continue to. So
Yeah.
I think that, reaching out to them and kind of letting them know. And I think we've spoken in the past about maybe kind of like having them share a statement or something
Yeah.
that could be beneficial. So,
Yeah, I've totally wondered, like they of course have all their own, Instagrams and Facebooks and da da da, and they're sharing, positive things that are happening around the city all the time. And I just wonder if they were to like lead by example, just kind of set the tone or stage for the year. I don't know if it would help, but like, I don't know. It would make me feel like they're trying in a way. To just do the best that they can. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it could hurt. I don't know.
right. It makes you feel better when some of it's precautionary and not reactionary, for sure.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and also it's just like not a good look for our town, city. Like, I don't know. You then you see a write-up on it in the Gazette, and a sign is vandalized, and it's like, that's the city we live in. I mean, it's not a good look. I don't love it for us. And it's like, we're
Right.
better than that, right? Like,
Like to think so, for sure.
right. And so I guess some of that too is like encouraging our neighbors to then speak up about it, even when they're feeling frightened of retaliation. I feel like if they have it on record that it's happening, then that's better than all of us maybe staying silent about. I mean, what are your thoughts there?
I think so. I mean, the more people who speak up about it, the more people are aware about it, the more that things can be done to stop it. I
Yeah.
think that that is probably the best way we can handle it. I know for us with my neighbors, I'm kind of blessed to have neighbors who think a little like-minded to me. So something that makes me personally feel better is when I get a yard sign. Sometimes I'll get a yard sign for like across the street and next door and stuff. And that way I feel less alone too. Because when you have the numbers, it definitely helps. So
Yeah, that's true too. We have put up signs in the past that people are like, hey, I like your just neighbors like walking by, hey, I like your sign, please keep it up, da da da. And yeah, it's been like a form of us just meeting our neighbors really and building that community. And I also feel like if we are continuously feeling like we are needing to hide this part of ourselves or to I don't want I always use the word bully and I'm trying not to, but like we're kind of bullied into silence sometimes or bullied into hiding sometimes. And I don't know, there could be someone else who in your neighborhood who just really appreciates that you like put that sign out or whatever.
for sure.
Yeah. And as far back to reporting though, too, if you do report it and that person who is being reported has then a history of other people reporting it, then maybe they're more likely to, follow through with some kind of follow-up or talk to that person, do something about it versus if you decide to kind of stay silent about it and everyone decides to stay silent about it, there is no record of this person having done those things.
Hmm. Yes, definitely.
So I feel like it just if you like see something, say something kind of thing and speak up about it. And yeah, I guess going into this, like let's try to not be afraid to that's our right. It is freedom of speech. Like, it's no different than having a flag out or whatever.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
our it's our right. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And I know, Danielle, I was actually curious to ask you because you have experience that I've never had as a poll worker and
Mm.
what that looks like, or what you might have heard or learned during your experience.
So, I do know that you're not allowed to like do any campaigning within 100 feet of the building. And so I personally, being indoors all day, I didn't really like see any, voter intimidation or campaigning or anything happening outside the building. No one came and said anything about, I think we had some petitioners. They were far enough away. That was not a big deal. That was mentioned. I will say, you know, I've I didn't experience this the day I was working the polls, but I do know someone else who works at the BOE who has shared stories about just people walking in with certain, attire, political attire, and that is also illegal, right? And like, I feel like that is a law because you could be intimidating voters or you could be swaying voters in a certain way, and it's there for a reason. Like that's a law for a reason. And I have heard that people walk in, with their head to toe candidate gear. And then they're usually asked to remove those items, turn them inside out, cover up, whatever. Um, I know that it's few and far between. Again, I think we're talking like extreme
Mhm.
situations. That's not the norm. I didn't experience it. I did experience a voter who just kind of yelled out, which machine prints out the so-and-so ballots, which like, obviously you just try to get that person in, out, done as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you do the best you can do to make your day also manageable for sure.
Yeah, and to not cause like even more of a scene, I guess. But like, guys, just know it's not acceptable. Like, it's just not cool. And again, it doesn't happen often. The stories that I'm hearing, it's few and far between, but it does happen. So if you're sitting there at home thinking like that stuff doesn't happen, it happens. But it just shouldn't, like
Yeah,
we're adults here. It just shouldn't happen.
I agree. And I feel like we have seen some, like you said, of people not wanting to like turn their clothes inside out or something like that. But I feel like we haven't seen anything super crazy here in Medina, at least that I'm aware of. I worked
That's
on
good.
Christina Collins' State House campaign in 2020 and or 2022, sorry.
Okay.
And we spent election day kind of at the polls, but also driving from polling location to polling location. Since we had volunteers standing outside of them, we wanted to make sure that they all felt safe and that everything was going
Sure.
well. And so we spent all day making sure that everything was okay and nobody had any issues whatsoever,
Okay, that's
which was
good.
really nice.
That's
So
good.
yeah.
I guess, so a question I have is signs at a polling location. So like I sometimes will hear, just having been around you and other people involved, that it's like, oh, a candidate will or an issue, there will be signs at a polling location, which I believe the rule is they can only go up the day of, or what's
The
is
night
it
before.
the
Yeah.
night before. Okay.
Mhm.
um that they're being, just totally taken, gone, disappeared. um and like I've had candidates send me pictures of them literally dumpster diving for their signs.
Yeah, we had an incident this last election cycle up in Brunswick with a candidate in a polling location where the polling location was at a church location. So
Okay.
the person who, pastor, the owner of the church, was pulling yard signs that they didn't necessarily agree with out, which
Okay.
you cannot
Totally
do.
illegal.
Yes. So
Okay.
the day was spent, it was not myself, but the day was spent going back and forth with the Board of Elections, which if you see anything like that, you can call your local Board of Elections. There's also, it's 1-866 our vote is another
Okay.
great resource for people to
Okay.
contact if they see anything. But
Okay.
because I understand not wanting to get involved, but if you make a phone call when you see something, that's really the best thing you can
Sure.
do, is to just ignore what the person is doing, but make the phone call and not put yourself
Okay.
in the middle of the situation. Um,
Yeah.
but when you're the candidate and getting your own signs out of the dumpster, you're in a little bit of a different situation there.
But
So
like that should never have to happen.
never, never.
Like,
And
in what world is that okay? It's not okay.
it's never okay. I mean, that's just crazy. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think what ended up happening is the Board of Elections ended up getting involved and they told the polling location, you can either leave out all of the yard signs or you can take not just the ones you don't like, but all of the yard signs down.
Okay.
So if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure they ended up just taking all of
All of
the yard
them.
signs down.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But
But
if
that was really good to know. I had no idea that there was a number to call. Like, if I'm standing in line and I see something happen, I should be like, we should be speaking up about this stuff, truly.
yeah, I think that the most important thing to do is to just report it when you see it, like we were saying,
Yeah. Okay. We're like almost close to time, but I think you had a really great list of like other forms of voter harassment or voter intimidation that I would just love to like quickly kind of, just so people know like anything else to look out for other than, I mean, we've talked a lot about signs, but yeah, I mean, what else is there? Like, what
Yeah.
should people not be doing?
Don't mind me as I read my piece of paper to you.
Please,
But
please. I also have notes here that I keep like, yeah.
yeah, but these are all the federal law protections of voter
Okay.
intimidation. So these are when you call that 866 our vote, any
Yeah.
of this is voter intimidation. So
Okay.
verbally or physically confronting voters, physically intimidating voters, such as standing by or hovering close by to voters as they attempt to vote,
Hmm.
posting flyers, threatening jail time or other punitive action against persons who vote,
Hmm.
asking voters for documentation when none is required,
Okay.
vandalizing polling locations,
Okay.
photographing or videotaping voters inside of a polling location, threatening the job, wages, or benefits of an employee or if he or she does not vote in a particular manner, flying the Confederate flag outside of a polling location or in a parking lot, and occupying the parking lot of a polling place in such a way that voters might be hindered from entering.
Okay. All right. So there's kind of a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a broad, thing, but I think it's good that it is because it kind of
I agree.
encompasses any kind of intimidation that we might see.
I agree. It's like, okay, just let somebody vote the way they want and
Mhm.
do it in peace, and that's it.
Yes, there's a reason we all go into our own ballot box and do it by ourselves. So,
Yeah. A part of me a little bit wonders too. I um feel like I've heard a couple people say that they're afraid to maybe volunteer or things, like specifically the polls, because of maybe a little bit of intimidation or just being like a hostile environment. I will say I was a little nervous then having heard those stories and then going into poll working. But I was also reassured many times that if we saw anything or heard anything that made us feel uncomfortable, to just tell our voting location manager or VLM. And so I felt pretty comfortable going in. Like, again, it's kind of like if you see something, say something, otherwise nobody knows it's happening. But I totally understand that people have felt like they might be retaliated against or just like afraid to speak up. So I think the moral of our story then today and this conversation is, heading into another, election that we have kind of been through before. Maybe let's do it different this time. Maybe let's not intimidate people. Let's let voters do what they do and just go and have their vote in peace. Let's not step onto people's properties and touch their things, vandalize their things, take their things. Maybe approach it with just a little more kindness. I don't know. I think that's where I'm at.
I think we could approach everything with a little more kindness.
Yeah, I agree.
Good thing.
Right, right. Well, I'm sorry that Tina couldn't be here today. I know she would have really enjoyed this conversation, but I'm really thankful that you were here today with me to have it. And yeah, let's just like hope for the best. Fingers crossed, all good things, good vibes going into this election. Any last words?
I'm just gonna leave people on, if for any reason you do see any voter intimidation at the polling location and you are struggling with the polling location, which has never happened in our county, but just in case you are in that situation, always ask for a provisional ballot, because you can always fill out a provisional ballot and then they have to go back at the polling location. The BOE has to do an investigation into your voting record and why you were not on the list. So if that ever
Oh.
happens, it's good to know that you can always do a provisional ballot.
Oh my gosh, that's really good info. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Let's leave off there. And yep, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can go ahead and email friendspeakingfreely@gmail.com. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.